And okay. All right, you guys, welcome. I have my friend, my internet friend, Barbie on today. Cognitive, that's how I say that, right? Dietitian. That's how I
Uh,
say your
the cognition dietitian?
cognition dietitian. Yes.
There we go.
You're right. Anyway, you guys, obviously, most of you all will have followed her. But follow her. Her name's Barbie, and I just focus on that so much because my daughter's 8 and she's obsessed with your name. And I'm like, hey, Barbie's going
Oh.
on the podcast tomorrow. Um, she was she was very excited and said she had to miss. She has a daddy daughter dance today, and it's Barbie themed.
Oh. Oh, well, that sounds amazing, and I'm afraid if Barbie is what she's expecting, I probably would have disappointed her anyway. So we'll allow the myth that you
Yeah.
actually spoke to Barbie.
Well, no, Barbie can be anything. So
Oh, okay. That's so true. That is
yeah.
so true.
That's the message. So I'm sure
That's
that's the
right.
message coming. So anyway, you guys, this is Barbie. She's a registered dietitian and she's got a whole bunch of other stuff that she does. I wanted to kind of let her tell her story a little bit. We're both kind of in the Midwest. She's in Chicago.
Chicago.
Different time
Very
zones.
close.
We talked about that. But I'm gonna let her tell her story on what she does, how you got started, and all of the things. So Barbie,
Yeah.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pam, for inviting me to chat with you. I really always so deeply appreciate the ability to spread the word about women's health and dementia prevention in particular. So I have been at dietetics. Nutrition is actually a second career for me. I went to school for PR and marketing, and I did that for a little while, and it just didn't light me up. So at about, I think it was 27, I went back to school for nutrition because had always been an interest of mine. There's a lot of medicine and science in my family, so I was attracted to that aspect of it too. And so I went to school. And when I was in school, I noticed that there was very little distinction between men and women in
Mhm.
terms of, nutrition recommendations, with the exception of pregnancy and lactation. And that always interested me. And I wanted to learn more about what the potential differences might be. So I always focused on women. I've always had a private practice focusing on women. I have worked with men, of course, but always with prioritizing women, women's health. And then the subject matter and the focus and the niche has sort of evolved with my own, age and health and all of that. And when I turned 42, 43, I started to become more and more interested in the menopause transition and the metabolic health changes that we experience: blood pressure, blood sugar, blood lipids, and then, of course, body composition changes. And then that led to understanding the connection between brain health and how it really does rest on our metabolic health. So that became my area of focus. And then, unfortunately, a couple of years ago, my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and she lives with me, and I take care of her. So it had been a professional interest for some time and
Yeah.
focus, but it became very personal a couple of
Wow.
years ago. So that's where I am. So I'm just super passionate about helping women understand the things that they can do in the name of prevention.
Yeah, very cool. I did not know all of that. That's very cool. I will say, when I started following you, it was, I don't know, it was a few years ago. And, how things just kind of get popped up. And I'm pretty particular on who I follow and engage with because I think that's kind of how we create our own algorithm. And also,
Yeah.
me being 42, noticed my body change. And I really just wanted to kind of surround myself with proper information because I do have a fitness space, and it's important
Mhm.
for me to bring the appropriate information too. So obviously you were kind of no fluff, very kind. But also I will say that I'm like, wow, she's a dietitian. She really knows what she's talking about. She's very kind with all of this proper information. There's no red flags as far as I know. And I'm like, yeah, let me just give her a follow, start peeking around and then you said something of the sort of that you were in your 50s. And I thought, oh,
Oh.
that can't be true. Gosh, she's younger than me
Oh.
at first, when I was first
Oh.
knowing you. And you said 50. I was like, okay, I'm all in with this girl because I
Oh, thank
follow
you.
people that I get to look up to because clearly you know what you're doing. and you know what you're talking about. And so anyways, I had to share that. I don't think I told you that before.
Oh, I really appreciate that. Yeah, I am proud of my age for a lot of reasons, but
Yeah,
yeah, I'll be 54 this year.
amazing.
But it's a blessing, this age. It really is, and I wouldn't trade it for my 20s or 30s at all. It's
Yeah,
a really fantastic time in a woman's life, especially if you can kind of lose the stressful way of looking at, nutrition and exercise and your health, and really just figure out exactly what's right for you, tune out the noise, and start paying attention to your own body and be a little bit more intuitive about your needs, and just be consistent about them. And I think it is a really empowering phase of a woman's life if we approach it that way.
yeah, and I love that message that you have, too, is kind of, and I was gonna bring that up, that you are very empowering. And,
Thank you.
and you kind of wanna put that in our hands to say, "Hey, this
Hmm.
is what's happening. Let's get to know you, and these are
Hmm.
the tools that you get to use, not, this is what we do." So I
Right.
love that message. Just wanted to share that little tidbit with you,
Thank you.
in the
I
background.
appreciate that. Yeah, especially with social media. Nothing drives me more crazy than people being very dogmatic and prescriptive about what's right, because each person is physiologically unique, especially a woman in the menopause transition. All of our experiences are going to be unique to us. We're each very different, what we're
Yeah.
going to be bringing to the table. So being patient and really listening to yourself and figuring out what you need, and not letting anyone dictate to you what that might be.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that maybe, that can transition us to a couple of the questions that, some of the people that asked,
Yeah.
just there were just a few, um,
Yeah.
outside of my own, about kind of that menopause transition. So there's a
Mhm.
lot of buzz, and I love it, around perimenopause, now,
Mhm.
because I'm right there. I'm right in the middle of it. And I love all of the information available, but it's really hard. It's
Mhm.
almost getting, as hard as kind of the wellness space and the kind of
Mhm.
fitness space, because everybody's using the perimenopause. Um, so
Mhm.
so can we talk a little bit about that kind of transition, and how you said it
Mhm.
kind of looks different for everybody, and maybe when does it start?
Mhm.
And kind of what can we look for, and what can we do during that kind of transition phase?
Yeah,
Nutritional.
so the menopause transition is going to begin with sort of the first symptoms of what that might look like. Usually for women, that's changes in menstruation. Um, that's usually the first thing they notice. Maybe some mood instability, maybe some sleep issues. The hot flashes typically come later when the estrogen gets really erratic. But it is this span of about 4 years on average, but it can be up to 10, maybe even 12 years,
Okay.
where estrogen and progesterone are just up and down, especially estrogen. And that is part of the reason behind a lot of the kind of crazy symptoms that we experience. It's not this, sort of beautiful, slow, steady decline
Yeah.
um, that our bodies get used to. It's up and down for quite a while, a few years, and then ultimately it gradually declines. So yeah, it can be about 4 to 10 years. The average age of the full menopause transition, so that would be 12 months without a menstrual cycle, permanent cessation of ovarian function. That the average age of that is 51. So
Okay.
the average age of the menopause transition beginning is 47, 46. But it can be earlier in women. And so, what can happen is just sort of feeling different. And then obviously noticing some very physical, obvious things like menstruation changes, hot flashes, vaginal dryness, mood instability, brain fog. Um,
That middle weight
and
kind of thing that
the
people talk
middle
about.
weight gain, absolutely, certainly weight gain, period, but then also the redistribution of body fat. Even if the number on the scale doesn't change, we can start accumulating belly fat because the loss of estrogen
Mhm.
creates a more androgynous shape. And what we want to be mindful about there is the accumulation of visceral fat, which can quadruple in the menopause transition. And that is the very highly inflammatory type of fat that lives beneath our abdominal muscles. It's not what we can see and pinch. Um, it is deep in our abdomen and it is highly inflammatory. And then, of course, we become more prone to insulin resistance as well because of that. And then also ectopic fat accumulation in the muscles and the liver, and ultimately the pancreas, which could lead to type 2 diabetes. So the weight gain, the excess abdominal fat, and then of the physical symptoms, those are the obvious signs. Those are things that we can see and feel. But other changes are happening too that we really want to stay on top of, and that's an increase in LDL cholesterol and ApoB. Like I was saying, this new vulnerability to insulin resistance, elevated blood pressure. So these are all things we don't necessarily know are happening. So it's a really important time to stay in good touch with your doctor, have your labs run at least annually, just to make sure you're staying on top of any upticks or anything going in an undesirable direction.
Yeah, awesome. And so there's so much to look forward to.
I know each one of those could be its own hour, right?
But I want to take it back just a little bit. So you said insulin resistance, and a lot of people that are listening are going to know what that is. But can you explain what that is a little bit? Because that's another word that kind of gets thrown around. Heal your metabolism. You might have insulin resistance. So can you explain what that is, just real briefly?
Yeah, in a nutshell, it is your body is losing the ability to properly metabolize carbohydrates. So your cells become unable to take up glucose in a way that becomes usable energy. So the insulin continues to circulate in your blood, unable to do its job. The glucose continues to circulate in your blood, unable to do its job. Both of these things alone can cause, inflammation. But this is usually caused by, there is a genetic predisposition, but typically in the average person, this is caused by fat accumulation ectopically. So inside the muscles, inside the liver, and then ultimately inside the pancreas. So to make a long, sort of complicated story short, one of the best ways to reverse insulin resistance is to lose this fat. And we can't specifically target ectopic or visceral fat. This just means overall fat loss. And to be clear, insulin resistance can happen in people of ideal or normal weight. And this is where someone's genes might be coming into play, where their subcutaneous fat starts spilling over into these undesirable locations, the visceral fat, the ectopic fat, perhaps sooner than someone else. Okay. So this is why some people can be living with even obesity and not yet have metabolic disease, whereas I have had clients 110, 115 pounds who have insulin resistance, pre-diabetes, in fact. So that's where kind of a genetic variant might come in. But that's essentially what it is. Your body is unable to properly use the energy that you're giving it.
And as you're aging, especially as a woman, that can make it a little bit more prone to get. So
yeah, for two reasons. First is this shift in body composition to less muscle mass and more fat, total fat, subcutaneous, visceral, and ectopic fat, unless we are getting enough protein and strength training optimally. So we're pushing back against that loss of muscle mass. So that, for those two reasons. And then in addition, this loss of estrogen changes the way that we metabolize glucose, both peripherally and in the brain. So we've kind of got two things working against us in the menopause transition when it comes to insulin resistance. So staying on top of the things that we can do to help fight that off is what we want to be doing.
So nutrition, lifestyle, exercise, all the things, right?
Yeah. And I would say, to keep it really simple, probably the three most important things: get enough protein, strength train, so you're building muscle, which is going to act like a reservoir for glucose and increase your glucose sensitivity, and good sleep.
Good sleep.
Sleep deprivation is a risk factor for insulin resistance.
Okay. I always say sleep is the secret sauce.
Like it totally is.
That's your hack.
Yeah, absolutely. For everything, right? For quality of life in general, but it is incredibly important for brain health in ways that we could spend another hour talking about. So we'll just keep it simple. Just go to bed.
Yeah. And what's the best, what's the average sleep range? I mean, there's wearables and trackers and things like that, but what's the best like hours if you could just give somebody like 6 hours, seven
Yeah,
hours,
I
eight
mean, the
hours?
average is 7 to 9.
Right.
Technically anything less than 7 hours is chronically is
Mhm.
considered sleep deprivation. So 8 sort of being this sweet spot. But again, everybody's a little bit different. But
Mhm.
I would say 7 to 9 is what we should be aiming for.
Okay.
So just really, especially for a woman in midlife, you really prioritizing that sleep hygiene, really making
Yeah.
sure you're going to bed on time. You're not caffeinating after, like 10 hours before bedtime, maybe having an earlier dinner, dimming the lights in the
Yeah.
evening, all kinds of stuff that can lead to better sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. So sleep for sure. Um, there's just so many things, right? But it
I
doesn't have
know.
to be complicated. And that's one thing, another
Mm-mm.
reason why I love coming to your page. I share your slides all the time. And you
Oh,
had
good.
a slide the other day and I loved it. And I actually screenshot it so we could talk about it. And
Yeah.
it was you did a little triangle, upside down triangle, and it was the essentials. And you said,
Oh,
kind of like what's required,
mhm.
and it was like the big one at the top. It was an upside down, and it was an energy balance, nutrition, and movement. That's alignment with your goals and practical and enjoyable, which is important. Something you
Mhm.
love to do, right? And then
Mhm.
you said having the necessary time, support, and resources to be consistent. So what's that mean? Because that's kind of like what makes it work.
Yeah.
Like the people around you, your environment. Is that what you're talking about there?
Yeah, it's self prioritization, which
Mhm.
can be very, very hard for women in
Yeah.
midlife because we've
Yeah.
probably spent decades building a life around
Mhm.
us, right? That maybe includes a partner, maybe includes children, maybe includes a career, maybe includes involvement in the community. We are really good at giving our energy away. And then
Yeah.
we find ourselves in our 40s and 50s really needing to prioritize our health in a way
Mhm.
that perhaps we didn't really need to before, which is going to require kind of re-examining what can I let go of, what is taking up too much time, are my relationships healthy, does anything need to change there, do I love my career or is it time for something else? So all of the ways that you can start to create space
Yeah.
and be in relationships or ask for help in relationships. I've had, a perfect example is, and this is not to shame anyone, but I've had so many clients over the years where they start this health journey, just
Yeah.
really cliche, but you know what I mean.
Mhm.
And the partner, because they're uncomfortable with change, it's not that they're intentionally trying to do anything awful, but they're uncomfortable with this change. So they will bring home donuts. They will want to go out to dinner.
Yeah.
They will complain about the fact that the
Sure.
person isn't drinking alcohol anymore. Just various
Mhm.
things. So making sure you're in a supportive relationship is super important, which not a lot of people think about.
Yeah.
Kind of the
They don't
last
going
things to
into
think
it.
about is right. I mean, the nutrition and exercise piece are clearly really important, but if your life isn't set up to make those
Yeah.
changes,
That's a great
it's really gonna be hard to get anywhere.
you have to set that kind of as number one, like take a big picture and look, okay, what's I think that even as a seasoned fitness coach, I've been coaching most of my
Mhm,
adult life.
mhm.
That's not at the top of our list to check people like, hey, you have all these things to do, but we talk about environment, but not first. And it almost needs to be kind of first. You're right. That's a
Yeah.
great point. Is to say, what's your support system first? How much
Mhm.
can you accomplish to kind of clear that space in your brain to focus on you? Yeah, I love that. I've never
Yeah,
thought about
and
that the first call.
it really is because you've just got to create the environment that's going to
Yeah.
support your new efforts. And additionally, if you're someone who, and this is extremely common, again, no shame, if you're someone who uses food or alcohol as stress relief, as self-care, which a lot of people do, that needs to change. We
Yeah.
need to find new methods for coping with the very natural stress that's going to be a part of anyone's life. But we have to make sure we're managing stress in a way that is not going to lead to food choices that are not in alignment with your goals, that is going to allow you to get good sleep, that is going to give you the energy to exercise, and
Yeah.
that you're dealing with it in a non-food and non-booze way. That's also really important.
Yeah, and I talk about that. I'm a director at a cardiac rehab, so I get the pleasure
Mhm.
to help, patients and whatnot, and they're kind of in this severe state. But
Yeah.
to talk about food is very hard of a change, especially in that fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth decade of your life. And
Yeah.
you have to eat to live. Like you don't necessarily have to smoke, you don't have to drink, but you have to eat to change that relationship with your food and how you cope with stress and how you celebrate things. I think is
Mhm.
a huge factor to change too. I always bring that up. I don't necessarily have all of the answers for it, but it's kind of
Right.
even sometimes being aware to say, hey, this is
Mhm.
this is a really big deal. Like it's okay that it's a big deal, but what
Mhm.
can we do to change that maybe?
Absolutely agree.
Yeah. And then the other part was good quality sleep and stress. You just talked about that. Stress kills,
Yeah.
which,
Yeah, it does.
yeah, it really does. And then discipline and self love, and that's kind of your arrow up. I love that upside down triangle. I'm actually shared this in my Facebook groups because it
Oh, I'm
was so
glad.
to have that the self love and the discipline. Like there is a point where you do have to say, I have to do work.
Oh, absolutely, and this was a lesson I learned, on my journey to sobriety. There
Mhm.
because, I prior to that, I always sort of bristled, and I've mentioned this in a post or 2. I sort of bristled at the term discipline. I really felt like it didn't have a place in a relationship in a conversation about health because it was just so sort of punitive.
Kind of a
But,
healthy mission, right? Yeah.
yeah, but we can't rely on motivation and inspiration every single day. Good health really is a most days choice, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So at a certain point, there does just have to be some discipline that I don't feel like it today, but I'm going to show up for myself and I'm going to feel great afterwards. So I absolutely have come to believe that discipline is crucial to
Yeah.
long-term success.
Yeah. And it's okay. I spent a decade of my life competitive bodybuilding, which takes a lot of discipline. And
Mhm.
I actually had to kind of work out of that kind of systematic way. So that's a whole other side of things. I'm sure you've dealt with people like that.
It can go too far. It can go too far.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm the queen of taking it too far. So you have to get it, but I think that when somebody can kind of create that discipline, and it's a big term, right? It's going to mean something
Mhm.
different to everyone. Um,
Mhm.
it's almost can make you so proud of yourself that, and
Mhm.
it's not in a strict manner or like you've talked about many times, where it's kind of bringing up old unhealthy patterns, thought processes,
Mhm.
but it can make
Mhm.
you so proud that you showed up that day when you
Yeah.
didn't feel like it. And you got the work done and you made a promise to yourself and you kept it.
To me, that's freedom. And I
Mhm.
know that the word discipline, it has connotations that are
Sure.
that are negative. And like I
Yeah.
said, used the word punitive before. It's like punishment. And that's not, and that used to be how I looked at it. I
Mhm.
no longer look at it that way. I look at it as self-love. I look
Yeah.
at it as self-respect, self-esteem, self-care to just, show up, do the thing, and you're going to
Yeah.
feel amazing afterwards, and you're going to be proud of yourself, and you're going to feel like you made the right choice. And so for that reason, I fully embraced and now love the word discipline, but as you say, it's nuanced. It can absolutely go too far.
Yeah, and I think kind of talking about it even in this manner for people to hear that, like, oh, okay. Because I mean, I can think of people right now off the top of my head that, if I say the word discipline, they're like, oh, they
I know.
they immediately put a block up. But that kind of has
Right.
to do with coming from me too. And they know maybe old me and old, competitive me, where I'm like, no, it doesn't mean that. It just means you
Right.
love yourself enough to take care of yourself. So I think kind of talking about
Right.
that too.
Yeah.
Is
And you can choose whatever word you want. You don't have to call it discipline, just the concept of showing
Yeah.
up.
I read something the other day and I loved this and I shared this with my clients as well because I'm like, oh, this makes a lot of sense because we tend to be so hard on ourselves, especially like you said, as a woman and midlife, and you have, and
Mhm.
some of us have young kids, some have older kids, some don't have kids, but they have all these other obligations. And we seem to be so hard on ourselves. And it said like if you only have 40%, you give 40%, it means you gave 100%.
Yeah.
And it's so true because you gave all you could give that day to
Mhm.
your
Mhm.
your time block to yourself. And
Yes.
that's what matters. Maybe you didn't
Mhm.
get the full workout in, maybe you didn't get the weights that you wanted to get or drink all the water you chose to pick for that day, but you gave
Right.
your yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the discipline conversation too. I love that you are able to evolve and change that too. And that's something else again that I loved about you as a person and your whole page is
Oh,
just like,
thanks.
hey, we can look at this a little different and say,
Mhm.
that's really not that bad of a word to use.
Yeah. No, it's really not, and it comes in handy. I mean, it really does.
Yeah. And so I wanted to talk about too before we get off topic. I'm like, oh hey, there's 25 minutes in and we didn't even get to talk about what I wanted to talk
That's fine.
about.
That happens a lot.
I guess I'll save that for last. I wanted to talk real quickly since we're on this topic about kind of the HRT. So I
Mhm.
know you talk about that a little bit. It is again kind of all over the place, and even
Mhm.
and you look at things and you see more of it, and it pops up in your Instagram. And me being
Mhm.
again 42 and right in the middle of everything, and probably every symptom aside from some of like the hot flash type things. I've
Mhm.
noticed body composition change and it doesn't, even from 38 to 40 and 40 to 42, I'm like, oh, things are just
Mhm.
not the same. Um,
Yeah.
but what if you can't take HRT and is it for everybody? Like, what is your
Mhm.
your kind of working with clients and maybe your experience on that?
Yeah. So to be clear, I'm not, credentialed to prescribe. So
Yeah,
everything I'm about to say
you're
it's based on research I've read and opinions I respect, but also just really opinion. Um,
yes.
so in terms of hot flashes, vaginal dryness, and protection against osteoporosis, if any of those are major concerns of yours, HRT or MHT, menopause hormone therapy or hormone therapy, is highly effective. So there's that sort of like bubble, right?
Yeah.
Then there are all of the other potential benefits that research is continuing to emerge on: cardiovascular benefits, protection against type 2 diabetes, dementia protection, just generally feeling better. A
Yeah.
lot of women use the word vibrant, but to be clear, HRT or MHT is not approved for, and it's not technically recommended for any of that yet.
Right.
We don't have documentation of that.
Mhm.
So I I can't make recommendations about HRT. That's beyond my scope of
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah.
But in terms of what I personally think, I'm very, very hopeful that within the next 5 to 10 years, there will be very clear data on whether or not it can be recommended for these specific protections against the decline in metabolic health and the decline in brain health that we can experience in the menopause transition. I'm very hopeful about it. Let me put it
Sure.
that way. And no, it's not for every woman. I have had plenty of clients and friends who tried it and tried for 18 months to kind of shimmy the dosages, the amounts, the method of delivery, and it just never suited them. And then, of
Yeah.
course, there are women with risk factors that prevent it from being an appropriate option. So it's kind of all over the place. And I really strongly recommend that if you're going to um, explore it, and this is so hard to do, unfortunately, but find a provider who really understands what they're talking about when it
Yeah.
comes to menopause hormone therapy. And if you don't feel heard or you don't feel supported, keep looking until you find someone else, and treat your conversations with these providers like a job interview, and you're the one hiring. Ask all your questions, self educate, self advocate, because this is really important. This is midlife is a window of opportunity to
Yeah.
set us up for our 60s, our 70s, our 80s, and hopefully beyond in a way that we are truly going to enjoy and thrive and be vital in. And MHT for a lot of women can be a part of that.
Yeah, but and for some of those that think that's the only way, it's not because you can
No,
still do
not
all those
even
other
close.
components.
Yeah, and I do, since you said that, I just do want to say, because I hear from these women all of the
Mhm.
time,
Mhm.
from women who are hearing from doctors who are very, pro HRT,
Sure.
They're not very nuanced in their they don't do a very good job of being nuanced in their messaging, and it's coming across to women who maybe haven't read the research, don't have sort of this more broad knowledge of the topic. It's coming across as if MHT is a fountain of youth, and if you don't take it, you're going to die of cardiovascular disease, you're going to get
Yeah.
dementia, you're going to shrivel up. That is not true.
Yeah.
It's just not true. It's a bonus for a lot of women, and for
Sure.
a lot of women who are really struggling with symptoms, it can be life-changing. But if it's not appropriate for you or you don't want to take it, please don't have FOMO. There are lots of
Yeah,
other things
I
you can
think
do
I
to
feel
protect your
like
health.
a lot of women, even I deal with, 35, 40, 50, 60s, and they almost have that kind of that sense of FOMO. Either their
Mhm.
friends are taking it, or they're like, all these doctors say to take it, and I can't either get it, or it didn't work for me, or I felt really lousy on it, or I just couldn't lose the excess fluid that I gained from it, and I was not comfortable.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm not the expert in that either. And I just say,
Mm.
well, you still have to do these other components anyway. So,
Right. And
you,
that is such an important point. Even if you are taking hormone therapy, you
Mhm.
still have to do the exercise and the eating well and the sleeping
It's
well and the
discipline.
managing your stress, right? You got to still do the stuff.
Yeah,
So it's not a panacea. It is so beneficial to some women,
yeah,
not appropriate for others. And if it's not appropriate or you just aren't into it, please don't worry. There's
yeah.
so much you can do to
You're
take good
still
care of
going to be
yourself.
healthy. We can still do
Yes,
this, and we can still have a lovely life post menopause and going through.
100%.
Yeah,
Yes,
awesome.
yes.
Um, and and I want to ask too about the Ozempic, because that reminds me
Okay.
of the FOMO. So I, run the majority of my fitness online, and it's primarily women. And I kind of have these message boards and whatnot, and we get to kind of talk and support. And I have recently noticed a lot of the conversation, and they'd be okay with me talking about this because we're all adults and that's why we talk about it, so we can have this community.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
even the younger, I would say upper 20s, early 30s, are starting to see their friends or people get on these medications like Ozempic, and they are putting in all this work. And I mean, they're having wonderful results. As a fitness coach, I'm like, you are
Mhm.
rocking. You are losing body fat. You are moving. You're hitting all your marks. You are setting yourself up for long-term success here. But they see these vast weight loss, and I've lost people, or they won't join the fitness aspect of it because they're like, oh, I just want to lose weight, so I'm just going to get on this. It's almost a sense of FOMO that's starting to develop, and
Yeah.
it brought to my attention. I'm like, wow, I never really thought about it like that, because they're kind of seeing these friend circles get some of these medications, and they almost are like, well, is my work that I'm doing, is it not worth it? And I'm like, it is worth
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
So I guess let's talk about maybe that. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Kind of people wanting to do that. And then
Mhm.
the other part is, I'll let you answer all of this. The other part is,
Sure.
I have I have clients that have been on Ozempic or other Mounjaro or things like that, and
Mhm.
they've lost a lot of weight with, doing exercise components, and they come off and they do just fine for the most part,
Mhm.
coming off. But how about you kind of talk us through that too? Like, if you do
Mhm.
on one, what should you do during, and how should you get off if you are able to get off? So the
Yeah.
combination of FOMO, and then what to do during, and then how to get off.
Right. So the FOMO is real. I have a lot of clients. I've had several, probably about 15 clients who have been on
Mhm.
medication, these medications. And my job for these clients is in relationship with their doctor, making sure they're staying nice and healthy, maintaining muscle mass, getting enough protein, exercising, doing all the things that are going to make a transition off of the medication, should they choose that, a little bit easier, but also just to make sure we're not losing too much muscle mass in the
Yeah.
process of also losing rapid losing weight rapidly, which is a side effect of
So
losing weight rapidly.
that would be a risk factor almost if you're not exercising.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, and so I also have a lot of clients who aren't taking the medications, but are envious of their
Yeah,
friend group or
yeah.
their people in their exercise classes who are on the medications. And so, yes, if you are on the medications or considering the medications, a couple things to note. You have to be sure that you are getting enough protein and that you are strength training, because when you lose weight rapidly on medication or not, you are also going to lose muscle mass. I had a client who had 17% muscle mass after 6 months on Ozempic. That
Mhm.
is very low.
Yeah,
She had
wow.
lost about 80 pounds and had
Is
not
it
been strength
exercise?
training.
Okay.
Yeah. So we needed to build that back up.
Yeah.
So make sure you're getting enough protein and you're strength training, and that you're also learning habits like getting better sleep, like taking good care of yourself, like managing stress in a non-food way. Because the main thing that the medications do, there are several different mechanisms, but the main thing that leads to the results is a dramatic decrease in appetite. So you're just overall eating less. Your brain just doesn't trigger you to get as hungry. It sort of stops that trigger. So that's going to go, the hunger is going to return when you're off the medication. So you have to figure out ways to cope with that, deal with that, learn strategies while you're on it. Use that as a window of opportunity. So healthy habits, enough protein, and strength training if you're on it and you think you're ever going to want to come off of it.
Mhm.
As for the FOMO, it's really important to understand that these medications are not appropriate for everyone.
Mhm.
I have seen them so dramatically change people's health and lives. I think they are a gift
Yeah.
to the people who need them. They are a
Right.
blessing and completely amazing. To
Mhm.
people who just want to lose 5, 10, 15, 20, maybe even 30 pounds and do not have metabolic illness, there are better ways that are going to be better for long-term strategy, in my
Mhm.
opinion. And so
At least
I have this
exhaust those
conversation
options.
with, say that again?
At least exhaust those options first, like, do the
Right.
lifestyle, do the weight training, and then, see where you get, because 'cause you'll probably land somewhere really good.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, these conversations that I have with my clients, they're always very personal. Their reasons for being, envious, let's just say, they're different for everyone, right? It
Yeah,
triggers
yeah,
something different in
absolutely.
each person. So I always talk through with them what their unique, kind of trigger
Yes.
is. But they're not necessary for the average person who just wants to, feel better, improve their metabolic health a bit, but highly appropriate for other people. So I
Yeah.
hope that answered.
Yeah, it did. And so and I guess so some of the people that I, help with their fitness and whatnot, they have a very hard time eating. And
Mhm.
I'm like, you got to make sure you eat enough protein. They're like, I can't. So what's your best advice for them? How to get that much food when you're not really like quote hungry? Because that's the whole point, like part of the point of what.
Yeah. If someone is really struggling to get their protein in, I mean, my best suggestion is going to be shakes or protein supplements.
Yeah.
Just whatever appeals to them most.
Mhm.
That would be the way to do it.
But get it in. You have to get like
Oh,
what.
absolutely, get it in. Yeah, and yes, and strength train. You've got to at least try to maintain that muscle mass for
Mhm.
sure.
Because losing the muscle can set you up, especially when you're younger, for losing bone. Like,
Yes, and
yeah.
insulin resistance.
Mhm. Yeah, so
Right.
I always
So,
try to make
yeah.
sure.
So if you ever want to come off of the medications, you have to make sure you're maintaining that muscle mass.
Yeah, and you wanna have success off of the medication. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's very helpful. I think that's a big question, a big conversation. The FOMO, again, I'm with you as a fitness coach. There's a whole side of fitness coaching that's like, oh, they shouldn't take them. And I'm like, why? Like, I mean, they can save people's lives. I've seen them not only help people lose weight to, save their life because they really need to lose weight, but also
Mhm.
sometimes giving them that hope. And they
Yeah.
lose the weight and they're like, yes, I can do this. And then,
Mhm.
you incorporate the other things. So I mean, to me, as a fitness coach and trainer, you kind of have your head in the sand if you are dismissing some of these modalities that we have in 2024. To
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. And so, but also you shouldn't have FOMO over something like that. Because we still have
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there are a lot of different approaches, and perhaps you just haven't found your right approach yet.
Mhm.
And, it's all, no matter if you take the medication or not, you still have to implement the exercise and the eating well. And if you want to protect your long-term metabolic health and brain health, these are
Yeah.
important facets
What's
that you
the
would need to
minimum
do even on the medication.
what's the minimum amount of protein? Let's say somebody's like, "Oh, I just cannot get, zero point 0.7 grams per my goal body weight," or whatever. Like, what's the
I mean,
minimum if you're like, "Just get this much for me?"
as a woman in the menopause transition, I don't like to see less than 1.2 grams per kilogram.
Okay.
I like to see more around 1.4 and 1.6 if I've got somebody who's like really, going after it with the strength
Mhm.
training and is super active. And maybe even a little bit more if
Yeah.
they're really super athletic or have a high calorie needs, but I not less than 1.2 grams per kilogram is what I would say.
Okay.
It's a
Alright.
crucial time to be maintaining muscle
Yeah.
mass. So,
Yeah, for sure. And I think even too, like I said, I still have some girls in their upper 20s and early 30s, and I'm like, do it now so that you don't
do
have
it
to
now.
so you don't have to
Yes.
you don't have to
I
worry
mean,
as much as developing those habits when you're older. And it's never too late. So anybody, it's never too late. But if you can
right. And I
Mhm.
Yes, and I like to stress the message that it's never too late. That said, it's never too early. I
Yeah.
mean, if someone can start taking excellent care of their metabolic health and which is going to lead to better brain health, if somebody can start doing that in their
Mhm.
20s, I mean, they're going to be so far ahead of the game and they are going to continue to enjoy good health for, I mean, provided that there isn't anything genetic happening or environmental. They're going to continue to enjoy good health for years and years and years. I mean, so
It
I
gives you a buffer.
strongly encourage anybody. Hmm?
I feel like it almost gives you this buffer, like a little bit, like when
It
you can get in when
does.
you're younger, and build that mass and that muscle mass and that lean mass. It gives you this little bit of a buffer when you get into the older, age.
Yes. I mean, my most of my work, whether it's corporate or one-on-one, I'm talking mostly to people in their 40s and 50s. But anytime I get a chance to speak to people in their 20s and 30s, I get really excited because
Yeah.
I just want to motivate them to get after it now.
Yeah, even because you look 30, so you just fit right in, so
Oh, stop. Thank you, though.
And so let's talk about the brain health. So that was one of the main things I
Yes.
really wanted to talk to you about was kind of you have a great message. It's all over your page, and people can just look at your Instagram and they can find real quick some brain health information. But let's talk about
Yes.
Alzheimer's, dementia, brain health because that is a huge focus of mine. I had Stuart Phillips on not too long ago on my
Mhm.
podcast, and we talked a lot about kind of goals as we get older and like my next half of my life and beyond is just to be functioning well. And, of
Mhm.
course, we
Yeah.
can live and look good, but
Yeah.
walk with my husband on the beach independently and think clearly. And brain health
Mhm.
is so big. So let's talk
Mhm.
about that. What is it? What is Alzheimer's dementia? And then kind
Mhm.
of you talk about the women's health kind of side and how we're a little bit more at risk. So let's
Yeah.
kind of start that. So like what is it? And
Right. So
yeah.
Alzheimer's disease is a disease of neurodegeneration. So,
Mm,
degeneration of brain tissue, brain chemistry. It is a type of dementia. So, dementia is sort of the umbrella. There are several types of dementia. Alzheimer's represents about 70% of all dementia. So, it is the most common form of dementia. About 1 in 9 people over the age of 65 will develop Alzheimer's disease, and 1 in 5 women. So women are just about twice as likely as men. So it's very significant, the difference between the sexes in terms of prevalence of Alzheimer's disease, again, which is partly why I am so interested in it, because there's obviously something very crucial there about being female
yeah.
that is a driver of it. It used to be thought that it's just because women live longer than men, but that's clearly not the case. And it is believed, it's theorized, that it has a lot to do with the menopause transition and this loss of estrogen. So again, um, MHT is appropriate for some people, may or may not be protective. We don't completely know yet, but this is a window of opportunity our 40s and 50s to really shore up our defenses against this cognitive decline and neurodegeneration.
Mhm.
The hallmark of Alzheimer's disease is the accumulation of beta amyloid plaques and tau tangles in the brain that the communication among the various regions of the brain and within the brain and within the brain and the body start to deteriorate. So
Yeah.
one of the first signs is memory loss. But that can be tricky in perimenopause because that's a very common symptom. But we're talking about really significant memory loss, like the kind that interferes with your daily life. Dementia or Alzheimer's diagnosis in midlife, so during the menopause transition, 40s and 50s, is extremely rare. We're really talking about diagnosis after the age of 65. That
Yeah.
is early Alzheimer's is rare. And then, of course, the ApoE4 gene increases your risk, and that's something that some people can get tested. I do recommend it if you have Alzheimer's in your family. If you
What test
don't,
is that?
that
It's
is a gene. It's APO. We all carry 2 copies of the ApoE gene, and there are 3 alleles, allele 2, 3, and 4. If you inherit, we inherit a copy from each parent. So if you inherit a 4 from one parent, you have a
Mhm.
2 to 3 times increased risk of Alzheimer's. If you inherit a copy from each parent, you have, so 2 4s, you have an 8 to 12 times increased risk of dementia, of
Oh, wow.
Alzheimer's disease. So it's not a guarantee. It's not a deterministic gene. There are 3 deterministic genes for Alzheimer's disease, but they cause early Alzheimer's. You would see this in your family. You would know that you have it most likely. But the ApoE4s, I think, are worth testing for people, or the ApoE gene, I think, is worth testing for people who have Alzheimer's in their family, just to see if that's a
Yeah.
contributing factor. Because there are some recommendations for people who carry ApoE4. But in general, what we want to be doing, and this is what I'm out here stressing every single day, we want
Yeah.
to keep our blood pressure in good check. We want to keep our cholesterol in good check. We want to make sure that we're not becoming insulin resistant. If we are, do the things that we can to mitigate it or reverse it, and to keep our body composition in good working order.
Yeah.
And all of that is a multifaceted approach with sleep,
Sure.
nutrition, exercise, and managing your stress.
Yeah.
The good news is all of those, that constellation of metabolic illnesses, you approach them all the same way.
Yeah.
And so that's the good news. It can be relatively simple to take care of all that from a nutrition and lifestyle perspective because it's all the same.
Yeah, and he said it's the good news is because all of the things we need that we are worried about take the same steps, basically. Sleep,
Yeah,
nutrition, movement, and building muscle. And
right.
that's all going
Yeah.
to help our brain health. Um, so you said women are at a higher risk, and then you
Yeah.
talked about kind of the modifiable risk factors. And
Hmm.
you put on there a little bit because I think I follow some of your information. It's just such a huge interest of mine because I'm like, I don't want my brain to go. I remember
Yeah.
being kind of I went through it like a almost depression state after I
Hmm.
got pretty heavily injured and kind of got thrown from my sport and changed the trajectory of my life kind of thing. And I remember seeing a psychologist because they said, or psychiatrist or what, I don't know, whichever one you see. I said,
A mental health professional.
said, well, there's not really anything wrong with you. And maybe you should go see this mental health professional. I said, fine, I don't care. Just fix my brain. If it's in my brain, let's just fix it
Hmm.
because this is not okay. And I remember him saying, like, no, you're just a car on the wrong roadmap. This happens to professional athletes all the time. Not that I was professional, but
Hmm.
I was living that way. And so
Hmm.
it was comforting, but I'm with you. Like, let's start this early. And if there's something going on here, let's give me the steps to fix it.
Yeah.
And you talk about kind of early on, kind of the education component when you're little, like I noticed
Hmm.
that. And then
Hmm.
even just steps you can take like in your teens, 20s, and so forth. So what are some
Yeah.
like modifiable risk factors that we can do to help us in the long run?
Yeah, so
Besides,
in addition to in addition to taking really good care of your metabolic health, there are a couple interesting ones, and one being education. Now, granted, there isn't a lot we can do about the fact that if we've missed out on good quality
yeah.
education, and that's more of a public health issue. That said, There is something really important that is referred to as cognitive reserve. And this is this concept of basically increasing the agility and resiliency of your brain. And the way that we do that is we think of our brain like a muscle,
Hmm.
and we learn new information and use it. So it's never too late. And granted, probably the research is talking about education during the time when our brains are actually maturing and developing, which cuts off at about age 25 ish. But again, never too late.
Yeah.
Start learning a new language and find a community of people to speak it with. Learn to play an instrument, paint, cook, start a garden, anything that's going to engage your brain and work it out and make you
Yeah.
think. This is called cognitive reserve, and it's incredibly important, as is
That's
social
hard to
connection.
do. That's hard to do when you get a little older, not because
Yeah,
I can't teach old dogs new tricks, but you have a busy life. And,
yeah.
I always think I want to learn that new skill. And I'm like, with what time?
With what time? I know, but again, it can start with just a couple hours a week, and
Yeah,
again,
I
remember
love that.
with the mindset that this is an investment in
Yeah.
your long-term brain health, and it's again, an opportunity, and it does become harder because we have less time, we have less capacity to focus, but that's exactly what we should be doing, is working
Mhm.
out, using it like a muscle. And
Yeah.
social connectedness is also incredibly important. Social isolation, loneliness is a big risk factor for dementia. So the more socially connected we can be, the healthier our brains. And if we can combine those two things, learning new information and using it, and having a social component, that's just like a party for your brain. That would
Yeah.
be, it's a great thing to be doing regularly. But also, what I want to point out that not a lot of people think about, and you're referring to that research, the Lancet Commission
Mhm.
2020 report, is hearing loss.
Oh,
Huge component.
okay.
So if you are starting to experience hearing loss, if you're someone who, for genetic reasons or illness reasons, developed hearing loss earlier in your life, please make sure that you're having regular audiology checks. You are using a hearing aid if that's appropriate for you, because there is a strong
Okay.
link between hearing loss and dementia. Also, taking really good care of our eyes and our mouths.
Mm,
Gum disease and vision impairment are also risk factors. So
wow. I love the human body. Isn't it
I
amazing?
know, it's wild. It's
I
really
know.
fascinating. I know.
Yes, it's so
And
great.
there's so much, and the brain in particular, there's so much we have no clue about. I mean, it's like probably the most unmapped organ, in
Yeah.
terms of really understanding it. So it's really cool. And but we again, it's the low hanging fruit, right? We don't
Mhm.
need all these fancy brain supplements and cognitive supplements or a special diet, or you don't need to worry about it. Just do all the things you already know are
Yeah.
so good for you. Just be consistent about
Yeah, forever and ever at
them.
some capacity. Like, you have to do it for the
Right.
rest of your life. No, I just think that's
Mhm.
so amazing. I mean, you talk about the brain health and the way it's, of course we think about the eyes and the brain. Like, at least I do. I connect that
Yeah.
very closely because they're right there. But you don't really think about the dental health and that kind of thing. But man,
Right.
the human body is so freaking amazing.
I
So
know.
designed, and really ultimately at the end of the day, takes some discipline. It takes learning your body. It takes doing the necessary components. And like you
Mhm.
said, that was another question, like supplements, like you don't need all of the things. You don't need all
Mhm.
of the flashy things, even though they sell well.
No. I know, you really don't, but again, it just creates stress, like you're missing out
Yeah.
on something really special, and chances are you really are not. The only time I recommend supplements is when there's a clear gap in someone's diet, and so
Mhm.
in regards to supplements, common gaps in the US in particular are vitamin D, omega-3s, and maybe magnesium, and possibly B12. So
Mhm.
those would be the ones, but those are so basic, right? We don't
Yeah.
need all the ashwagandhas and the mushrooms and all the things.
Yeah, so the ashwagandha, that's a big thing because everybody's got high cortisol now.
Oh boy.
And for me, as a fitness, and again, a fitness professional, I try to talk people off the ledge. And I'm like, okay, don't be afraid that high cortisol is causing you belly fat, because don't be afraid to work hard. And it's almost making people to say, whoa, I shouldn't really be doing those workouts because
Yeah.
it's going to cause me cortisol. I'm like, well, cortisol is probably a little important. So you probably don't need
Right.
to
It's
dash
pretty
on all
important to
the
human. Yeah, you would die without
time.
cortisol.
Yeah. And so don't be afraid of the hard work. Um, because you're, and I say this lightly, and people and my people know that I'm just kind of joking a little, but you're not really working probably as hard as you think you are. And
Well, right.
and
Yeah.
so it's not probably an issue.
Right.
And
I post about this frequently because it is a big deal for women are hearing this all over the place,
yeah,
especially in relationship with cardiovascular activity, which is so important to the health of your brain. And
yes,
it's the number one way to reduce visceral fat, which is this
yep,
deep abdominal fat. So yes, an excess of cortisol can lead to an accumulation of belly fat or intra-abdominal fat, but this is not happening from your workout.
and
Okay.
that's long term over time
Yeah. Yes.
piling up for like years. And
Right.
that would
It's
be
not.
something that would be diagnosed by a physician, I'm sure.
Right.
You
If
know,
you
there's
truly have an issue with your cortisol levels, that is a diagnosable condition and something that you should be working with a doctor on. You shouldn't be afraid to work out. Working out is one of the very best things you can do. And I mean, of course, provided that you're not killing yourself and needing a nap afterwards. But if you're feeling good after your workout, you're not doing anything harmful to your cortisol levels. And that just leads me into just something I just want to be sure I say, which is that we as women just need to go a little easier on ourselves and not be in such a hurry to make these changes. I really encourage people to give it a year. I don't care if
yeah,
you've got 5 pounds to shimmy in your body composition or 50. Give
yep,
yourself a year to really get to know who you are, what
mhm,
your needs are, what kind of food do you enjoy, what kind of exercise do you enjoy. Give yourself time to learn sustainable habits because whatever is working needs to work forever. Success
yeah,
in these areas are measured in years of maintenance, not 6 weeks of white knuckling something.
yeah,
So give yourself the time, and it's not going to look the same for you or me or any other woman. Just give yourself the grace of really understanding what lights you up when it comes to taking good care of yourself, because that's the thing that's going to last and get you in great shape.
yeah, and protect all of the other functions that we're talking about.
Totally.
Yeah, no, I love that you said that because it was such passion, and that's your underlying message. Like this,
Mhm.
and mine too. Like we all deserve to feel well, and we all
Yes.
deserve to live this abundantly healthy life, and that's going to look different for
Mhm.
everybody, and everybody's goals are different. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that, and I see this, and I remember my own period again of kind of figuring out who I was after a competitive athletic stint and just
Mhm.
kind of figuring out my health again to do things differently, which I'm so blessed that that happened because it,
Mhm.
got me here to be able to teach. But people forget what it feels like to feel well, and they
Mhm.
forget what it feels like of what they're striving for. So they
Yes.
see this weight loss as kind of this carrot that they're chasing. And it's not always just the weight loss. It's all the things in the middle that you're going to accomplish,
Yep.
the discipline and the promises to yourself and the high-fiving yourself of your community.
Yes.
But I think people just do really forget what it feels like to feel good. And I try to
Mhm.
remind people that you felt well at some point in your life, whether you were
Mhm.
9 or 10 or 12 or 20. There was
Mhm.
some time in your life that you felt good. And I think it is difficult for people to understand what to strive for when they just forgot. So I just try to remind people like you did feel well at one point. I know it seems so out of reach, but I promise you, like you're worth feeling well and it is there. It's in your reach. Just takes time.
Yes, and I'm so glad you said that because good health should feel good.
Yes.
It shouldn't feel like stress. It shouldn't
Mhm.
feel like, "Oh, I can't eat this," or "I've gotta worry about that," or "I've gotta map out every single meal and every single calorie," or "I can't miss a workout," or "I can't go on vacation and enjoy myself." That's not good health,
Right.
So it's really important that you find this nice mix, this sort of sweet spot for yourself that is
Mhm.
a combination of this discipline that we're talking about and showing up even when you don't quite feel like it, but also really enjoying the hell out of your life because that's what we're here for. So that
Absolutely.
takes time, like you say.
Yeah.
Give yourself that time.
Yeah, time and grace and the discipline, and I've heard you talk about this a little bit too. And I teach basic kind of measurements and what a macronutrient is, and we don't strictly stay to that, but I think it's an important tool to
Mhm.
understand, because we've gotten so far removed again from what it feels like to feel well, what it feels like, or what portion sizes look like. And I think it's a valuable tool to learn. But again, you don't have to be extreme to that or kind of stronghold yourself to that. But it is kind
Right.
of the discipline, and maybe that's your education that your brain can relearn, can learn
Yes, I
something
mean,
new.
for a lot of people, it certainly would be, and obviously, we don't want to obsess, but, kind of that upside down triangle you were talking about, or pyramid, at the very top is creating a healthy and sustainable calorie deficit or energy balance that you enjoy, and understanding what your energy needs are is the first step if fat loss is a goal. And
Yeah,
because we do have so much concern about disordered eating and eating disorder, and because diet culture is such a hot mess, we get a little concerned when we start talking about these things because people might interpret that in a way that is going to lead to something dysfunctional.
sure.
But the truth is, and yes, of course, if you have a history of that, then it's not appropriate and there are other methods.
Mhm.
However, for the average person, tracking your calories with diligence and or macronutrients is so illuminating,
Yeah.
and I mean has completely changed the game for the majority of my clients who have chosen to do that exercise. And again, it's a temporary thing. It's like a 30 days of doing this just as an educational tool. It's not, you're not going to be tracking your calories when you're 80. You know what I
No,
mean?
no,
Or
and I
even
hope
in
not.
6 months, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with you completely. And in the food environment that we have, where hugely caloric food, super calorie dense, nutrient poor food is available 24/7 and in these enormous bags, and just, or boxes, or in restaurants with bottomless breadsticks and, whatever else, it's very
Mhm.
difficult for the average person to understand what they're consuming. So
Yeah.
I think that, that absolutely has a place, and it can be a
Yeah.
really great starting point for people.
And you can go back to it. I mean, just just recently, I was like, I'm going to start tracking again because I
Mhm.
don't feel like I'm
You
where I
felt
should
like you're veering off.
be. And I'm like, okay, so I took note and I took track, and I'm like, wow. I kind of set my protein calories, and like I actually had a friend help me with that because coaches need coaches. And I said, take a look at
Yes.
this. And he said, let's set you here and here. And I won't ever tell that to people because I'm different than everybody else. So,
Yes,
uh,
of course.
but I thought, wow, I was really underreporting because I'm starving and this is a lot of calories. And I had
Mhm.
almost instant results because I'm like, wow, I was really eating a lot more, nuts and seeds than I thought I was choosing. And once I measured it again, even though I've been in this space my, again, entire adult life, I still had to go
Mhm.
back and kind of not re-educate, but just kind of revamp myself. Like just a week, this
Yeah,
just 1 week of looking at it and to say,
totally.
oh wow, I was shooting a little over. you
Yeah,
know?
well, I mean, research tells us that even nutrition professionals underestimate by about 30%. 30% is significant. So, yeah, it doesn't hurt to check back in after a little while. And I mean, just to be clear, because I don't know how we got so far removed from this basic truth of human biology, which is that a calorie deficit is the only thing that is going to lead to weight loss. We
Totally.
don't need to think about our hormones or our insulin or our glucose spikes or any of that. We have to create a consistent calorie deficit over time when we enjoy. That's it. It's really that simple. It's the rest of that pyramid that's hard.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, I think that's, is there anything else you kind of want to share on that? Because I know we're at the
No,
hour mark.
I
It's hard
I
for us.
think I talked a lot. I think you asked really great questions, and then I babbled a lot. So I
No,
think
it's
I got it
great.
all out.
It's great. I love the passion, and to be very clear, I wanted to share this too with a lot of it because again, I'm in the fitness space. My, husband and I own a CrossFit gym, so we're very involved in fitness and strength and all of the things. But at the end of the day, a lot of people come to me in desperation for fat loss.
Mhm.
we don't want it to be a quick fix. So if you take nothing else from this, from Barbie, the professional, don't lose too quickly. It is
Yeah.
not it is not sustainable. It is
Mhm.
not a flex for you to
Right.
lose that quickly. I mean, water, all those things, of course that can come off
Yeah.
first, and that's great.
Right.
But you're setting yourself up for long-term negative health.
Absolutely. Sometimes when I start with a client, she'll say, I only lost, 3 pounds this month. It's like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. That is the rate that makes me super happy because
Yes.
it's very unlikely that you're losing muscle mass. You're creating habits that are going to be sustainable long term. If you had told me you lost 10 pounds in a month, I'd be worried that we're going too quickly. This isn't going to be sustainable. So, absolutely, slow and steady is the best approach. And, sometimes people will, so many people have DM'd me like, I don't know if I can take your weight loss advice seriously as someone who is clearly, not struggling in that way. And I say that historically, no, weight, it hadn't 99 problems, but weight wasn't one, right? Until
Yeah.
47. And between the ages of 47 and 50, I gained 38 pounds. And so I took a year and I tweaked my habits, and now here we are 3 years later having been able to sustain that loss. But
Yeah.
absolutely, I understand what it is to need to have a look at what your habits are and change some things. So just want to make that clear. We're all in the same boat. We've all got our thing.
Yes. And we all have to do the things forever. Like you and I
Yeah.
and every other fitness and health professional have to do the things. Before I let you go, what is
Yeah.
your, and I heard you talk about it, you're probably gonna, I already know what you're gonna say. What's your least favorite diet trend that goes on right now that people come to you or don't come to
Oh,
you?
I mean,
Come to
there's
you.
so much I see, but I think the thing I hear, because obviously we all have our own client base, and the woman who comes to me is most confused about the hormone and fat
Okay.
loss conversation. Hormone being way too broad, way too vague a term. If someone is talking about hormones, insulin, or glucose spikes and needing to fix all of that in
Mhm.
order for you to lose fat, it's very likely that they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So that has probably the thing, those 3 words, when it
Yeah.
comes to a non-expert, so someone who is not an endocrinologist or
Mhm.
some other professional who truly understands hormones. Um, you don't need to talk about all of that in order to be helpful to people with fat loss. And
Right.
I know for a fact it is confusing a lot of women. We would be far better off if we could all get on the same page and talk about calorie deficits, strength training, exercise, getting good sleep, and managing our stress. We don't need to get fancy and talk about things that aren't really the crux of the problem. Does
Yeah,
that make
no,
sense?
yeah, no, that makes total sense, and I'll probably clip that because that's a good little clip right there because I think that's a big message. I mean, on your
Mhm.
end, especially and mine, because people come to me expecting me to know, and I'm like, whoa, and that is not what I do, but I can help you with these areas that potentially could help you feel better, and you might
Mhm.
use that conversation. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. It's just those, if someone is pushing those words up front
yeah,
or those terms up front, it's a red flag,
yeah.
because that's really not the crux of the issue that we need to get a handle on.
Yeah, and a lot of those things, and again, I'm obviously not a doctor, endocrinologist at all, but some of those things can be reactive. So, like,
Mhm.
if you get your health under control, then sometimes they might be a little different. At least I've noticed that in myself.
Right, absolutely. And I mean, generally, they'll put these kind of fancy terms up front, but their recommendations are eat well,
Yeah,
sleep, get good exercise, and
yeah,
manage your stress. So it's the bright shiny object that they're drawing you in with, but the if there's any legitimacy to what they're talking about at all, they're not just trying to sell you a bunch of supplements or some crazy diet. It's all the low hanging fruit.
yeah.
So just be
The boring
mindful of,
stuff.
yeah, it is. It's the boring stuff. The boring stuff is what works.
Yes, yes, it is. Consistency over intensity. That's what I always
That,
say. Like, just get
that's
consistent.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, Barbie, thank you so much. So
Thank
much. I could
you.
talk to you forever. Maybe we'll
I
have to
know.
on again, do a live or something like that.
I would love that.
Based on this. So it's so fun to talk to other people about this because, not everybody wants to talk about this for hours, but I do.
I do too.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. You guys go follow Barbie on Instagram. You also have a website. I'll post everything under here below. But what's your website?
It's barbieboules.com.
Okay. All right. And then they can find you there if they want to contact you and either work with you and you offer kind of those services too. So to like not just like corporate, but do you offer anything at all?
I just pressed pause on my one-on-one coaching as of next Tuesday. So I'm moving on to something else that I'm hopeful will be a lot more accessible
Yeah.
to the women I've been serving for the last several years in terms of metabolic health and brain health. I'm working on something that I'll be launching next year. But yeah, I'll be
Well, you can
continuing the corporate
follow
stuff.
her on there. Do you have a mailing list or anything like that? Maybe.
I do. In my bio link, I have a few free downloads that if any of
Oh,
that
great.
appeals to you, you can enter your email address and then you'll be updated on what I'm up to next.
Yeah, that's the best thing. You guys get on email lists because we don't own Instagram. We don't own all the social
Yeah.
media. And they could go down. So the people that you love, go get on their email list because then they can stay connected. So
Yeah,
Barbie,
that's a
thank
really
you
good
guys
point.
so much for all of your time.
Thank you, Pam.
I love your work and I'm so glad that we're connected.
Thank you. Me too. Thank you for all of your support. I really appreciate you.